Hello, lovelies. Just doing a video looking at a list that went viral recently. Um, the top 25 Southern MCs. Now, of course, these sort of lists come around all the time and can be very subjective, and it comes with things like this, particularly in terms of like lists of top rappers and things like that. I mean, I do my positioning on certain rappers can fluctuate depending on my mood and who I'm listening to at the time. So I'm not. I always feel a bit uncomfortable doing those kind of lists because there's just so many artists from history to look over and try to fit everyone in. But with this being a specifically Southern MCs list, at least there's those parameters to work with of the areas to look at. So it would be easier for me to determine who I feel is can make this list and that kind of thing. So let's just have a quick look over the list, and I can just give my opinion about certain artists and where I feel they belong on here. Let's see where it is. Right. So got up there. As you can see, I mean, we're going to be going through it anyway, but that's the list itself. I don't know if it's from the Shade Room or whatever, but I mean, this is where it seems to have come from. So anyway, we'll take it from there. Number 25 is Pastor Troy, who seems to have been placed on as an afterthought, as Jeezy was on there first and was crossed out and replaced with Pastor Troy, which, that kind of adding onto the list kind of tells you all you need to know about Pastor Troy. I don't know. I mean, I certainly feel more comfortable with Jeezy on the list. I mean, Jeezy does have a bit of a history of being kind of repetitive and monotonous with his rhymes and his style, but has made some good albums and some really good songs, and can have some really good rhymes when he wants to. And in terms of overall influence, which I'm sure would play a part in a list like this, not just bars. Was very prominent in the early trap music scene, which spawns the huge trap music scene of the day, for better or worse. So in terms of overall influence, it certainly makes more sense for me for Jeezy to be on here than Pastor Troy, who I don't really know outside of some guest appearances on other artists' work. So I don't know his full discography that well, but from what I have heard of him, I don't quite get. I mean, I suppose he has an interesting voice for a rowdy chorus or whatever, but as an actual rapper, doesn't really do a lot for me from what I've heard, from what I can gather, from things I know about him, and his discography. Number 24, Killer Mike. Happy to have Killer Mike on this list. Feels a bit low. Killer Mike is certainly someone who's been a very consistent MC. His work with Run the Jewels in particular has really showcased just what his capabilities are. And I'd have thought that would have notched him a few more points in terms of influence the way that Run the Jewels have really kind of shown how independently artists can be successful. And again, very well respected lyricist. So yeah, very happy for Killer Mike to be on here, but I would certainly have him a lot higher than 24. Number 23, Quavo of Migos. I couldn't tell you whether Quavo is the strongest lyricist of Migos. Spoiler, he's the only member on this list. But yeah, I mean, none of Migos particularly do a lot for me lyrically, so I personally probably wouldn't have any of them on a top 25 list. Yes, I can understand that they have been a very preeminent group of the past, decade nearly. But yeah, it just doesn't do a lot for me. Number 22, 2 Chainz. So from being Player Circle's Titty Boy to just spoiling off on his own and doing freestyles and getting a lot of attention that way for his solo stuff as 2 Chainz. It came like it was supposed to be a really big new thing, but just the solo stuff doesn't really improve from his original group work. If anything, probably worse. At least Players Circle kind of had their lane, and under Disturbing the Peace, making guest appearances on Ludacris's stuff and things like that, was fine. Solely 2 Chainz hasn't really done a lot that's impressed me. As he had a few okay appearances. His stuff with Good Music with the Cruel Summer CD was fine. Some good appearances on De La Soul's recent album. I think Usher's recent album as well, he had a decent enough appearance on. But yeah, generally doesn't do a lot for me, so yeah, I wouldn't have him on here. Number 21, Big Crit. Someone who I really do want to be more familiar with in terms of overall catalogue, but everything I have heard of him has been really, really good. So I would probably argue for him to be higher than 21. Number 20, Currency. I couldn't actually tell you if I'd heard any Currency stuff. Certainly someone who has always kind of been around as someone who's like supposed to be quite a top tier lyricist. If I rack my brains enough, I probably could find some time that I have heard him, but I say nothing really springs to mind, so I'm not familiar enough to qualify his positioning on this list. I'm sure number 20 would be a good position for him, but don't know enough of his work to be able to say for certain. Number 19, Gucci Mane. Again, someone who was big in the early trap music scene. Certainly has put out a lot of music. Feels kind of quality over quantity, quantity over quality. Excuse me. A lot of the time, has had a couple of decent appearances. His feature on Yellow Wolves, I Just Want to Party was okay. Some good lines in there. Generally doesn't do much for me. I actually I think I'd prefer Jeezy overall as a lyricist than Gucci. So yeah, I guess I can get Jeezy being on here, but I don't think Gucci does enough for me to make it on here. Number 18, Ludacris. A very uh, prominent member of the Dirty South hip hop scene from the early prominence of it. Someone who's kind of been seen as, I suppose, like the mainstream party rapper, which, to an extent he is, but does have a variety of styles over his catalogue, particularly with a lot of his earlier albums. Really sort of brought forth a lot of the punchline based rapping, even some multi-syllable rhyme schemes throughout a lot of that, and can do more rapid fire rapping, some reflective songs, women's songs, sex songs. Has a lot of styles, a very cartoony style as well earlier on, which really kind of helped set him apart from a lot of other rappers. So yeah, overall, really big fan of Luda's. Would probably argue for him to be higher. Certainly top 10, I'd feel, for Luda overall. Number 17, Mystical. Kind of, has a great style that's been very influential. A very speed rap style. Kind of hits and miss about what he actually says in his rhymes, though. He has made some very memorable songs. Um, yeah, apart from that speedy style, though, there isn't a lot to Mystical overall. Can be very enjoyable in doses. Not sure if there's enough there to overall make the top 25, though. Certainly doesn't do a lot for me lyrically as a Luda, Big Crit, Killer Mike. Number 16, Juvenile. Similarly, has has a big name in early southern hip hop, or the late 90s, early 2000s, and has had some enjoyable songs and guest appearances. But again, lyrically, not a lot there for me personally. It certainly seems to have been usurped quite early on in terms of positioning hip hop by Lil Wayne, who's kind of been a more capable lyricist. So it's not nice to include Juvenile on here, but personally, I'm not sure if I would have him quite in a top 25. Just considering all the other southern MCs, I'm going to try and get onto later, who I feel could have been on this list as well. I'm not sure if Juvenile would have made the cut. Number 15, Celo. Spend so much time as a singer, you're going to forget they actually start off as a rapper in Goody Mob. And I mean, a lot of the Goody Mob stuff I have kind of missed, but all the things that I have heard from them and from Celo as a rapper has been really enjoyable. Celo certainly, as part of that kind of Dungeon Family group, has generally stood out as a decent lyricist. From what I've heard. His work as a singer has been very entertaining as well, and I can kind of see how his rap style can bleed into his work there as well. So this is probably a good position for him overall. Number 14, Bun B. Similarly, probably a good place for him. It's always been a fairly standard MC. Not always, that doesn't always hit out of the park in terms of his verses, but when he does, he really does. Has had some really, really standout verses in his past. Has a great solo discography as well as his work as part of UGK. Some phenomenal guest appearances, particularly in terms of southern artists making guest appearances on tracks. Has been really good. His verse on Lil Jon the Eastside Boys, Rep Your City, real standout. I say this is probably a good place for him. Not too mad him being out there. Number 13 and number 12, might as well do it together. And number 13 is 8 Ball, and number 12 MJG. I've always kind of seen that people say that 8 Ball is the better MC of the two. Every time I've heard them, I've kind of felt MJG was a bit stronger. So I'm kind of interested. So I am kind of happy to see them being placed that way round on this list. Having said that, I'm not too familiar with their overall discography to be able to properly rank them lyrically. And also everything I have heard has kind of been fine. I don't necessarily know if I would get them on a top 25 altogether. I'm sure a very influential duo for the early parts of southern hip hop, Memphis. But I'm not sure overall I could get the pair of them on here. Number 11, Pimp C. Always kind of felt Bun B was the stronger rapper of the pair. RIP to Pimp C and everything. But I always, in terms of Pimp C's style, his work as a producer and as a vocalist has has always been really well done, and I feel as part of UGK that's kind of where his strengths were, not necessarily as a rapper. His laid back style, while it does kind of mesh well with Bun B, who tends to be a bit more a bit more pacey of a rapper. Certainly Bun B always felt like the stronger of the two lyrically, and I don't think I could get Pimp C as high as this, if on the list at all, to be honest. Number 10, Project Pat. So in terms of 3-6 Mafia and their affiliates, Project Pat being an affiliate of 3-6 Mafia, their early kind of influence of that really kind of creepy, spooky style is really enjoyable. In terms of overall lyricism, I don't know whether I don't know enough of their overall catalogue to be able to rank lyrically whether Project Pat is the best of the collective, or any of them together. They've always kind of felt about the same level lyrically to me. There was a time when they were kind of that mid 2000s time when they were really kind of getting in the mainstream, where Juicy J kind of felt like the stronger lyricist of the group. Always kind of felt quite energetic and charismatic. It's like he was going to be the standout, breakout member of the group. Went solo, and it turned out to be the worst thing that ever happened. He just like lose anything that made him interesting, and just reverted to very standard druggy club songs. So that aside, all of them have kind of felt about the same. A great collective, and very influential group. Not sure if I could get any individual member on top 25 though. Number 9, Andre 3000. Not at all surprised to have Andre on this list. Bit surprised to have him only just make the top 10. Thought it would have been a bit higher, considering how often he's on non-Southern MC lists, with good reason. Andre's always been extremely revered as a rapper for his eclectic style, very sort of poetic nature, and just really good rhymes and metaphors. So there's no doubt there's a huge influence as an early Southern MC, and just as an MC overall. Easily see him in the top 10, but would probably get him higher. Number 8, Future. I'm tempted not to dignify this with a response, but I do have to kind of talk about everyone on here. So never really did anything for me. I can see that he has been a huge influence on the past decade of hip hop. The trap and SoundCloud scenes. Certainly not in a good way. Just the style never really. I never understood the style at all. As an occasional vocalist, a chorus person can be tolerable, but as a rapper, just really doesn't work for me. Number 7, Big Boy. Obviously also of Outkast, and kind of often gets placed below Andre 3000, so it's quite nice to see him actually placed higher on this list. Not particularly mad at that. It's a very capable lyricist and very underrated, considering the acclaim that Andre gets. I can understand that doesn't maybe have quite the variety of styles that Andre can come out with, but lyrically is definitely one of the better Southern MCs. So I have no real issue placing him above Andre. Certainly on any list, they do kind of need to be next to each other, or very close to each other. So definitely both top 10, arguably top 5, both of them. Number 6, Rick Ross. Again, never really did a lot for me. A very prominent member of mainstream hip hop for the past 15 years or so. The kind of faux Biggie Mafioso style never really worked for me. At least Biggie could kind of delve into different styles and topics in his work. Rick Ross kind of only really seems to go for like the lavish luxury lifestyle raps, of which once you've heard one of those verses, you've kind of heard all of them from him. Anytime he does try and stray from that, it doesn't really quite hit either. Um, Not to say that there hasn't been songs that he hasn't been tolerable on, but that's pretty much the highest praise I can give. Just never really did anything for me. Certainly wouldn't have him top 10 or top 25 particularly. Um, Number 5, J Cole. Yeah, I mean, someone who you do kind of forget is technically a Southern MC from North Carolina, so is technically from the South. She doesn't have a typical Southern style, or conceptually doesn't really have a lot of Southern style songs or anything like that, but has made some really good albums. One of the strongest overall rap packages of the past decade or so. I've always enjoyed his rhymes. Maybe not every bar is a home run, but from the mixtapes to the albums, pretty much everything that I've heard from him has been really, really good. And I can easily see him top 5. Being one of the greatest rappers, I say, of the past decade a bit. Really influential for his scene and hip hop overall. Yeah, I'm really happy for J Cole to be on here. Number 4, Pusha T. Again, someone you kind of forget is actually a Southern MC, Virginia. But was a very consistent rapper. Similarly to J Cole. Maybe not everything has been the strongest, but certainly a very recognisable style that rarely falters. I'd argue that perhaps, with him not being quite as varied as J. Cole, perhaps he should be slightly under. But certainly the two of them being close to each other works pretty well for me. Being in the top 10 works. I can see that Malice from clips as well. Understand that him not having the successful solo career that Pusha has had kind of disqualifies his high placing, but when clips were together, both of them were really great MCs. So I would certainly argue to have Malice on this list, if not as high as Pusha. He certainly needs to be on here at some position. Very influential group from the kind of early days of the dark drug dealer talk. So I would definitely have Malice on here. Number 3, T.I. A really strong presence overall in hip hop throughout the 2000s and 2010s. Has had stronger moments lyrically. Sort of Paper Trail really springs to mind as a really standout moment for him as a lyricist, but has generally been pretty consistent. In terms of Southern rappers, has always kind of stood out as a very strong, charismatic figure. Has a variety of things to discuss. Perhaps, say in different periods of his career, has had more things to talk about, and as the latter part has perhaps gotten a bit stale and repetitive, but overall very strong. Top three, maybe not quite top three for me, but I haven't really got much issue with him being this high. Certainly top 10, I would definitely see. Yeah, Ti very strong for me. Number two, Lil Wayne. Again, I can completely see why Wayne is this high. No pun intended. Um, Extremely influential artist, arguably the most influential on this list. Um, the amounts of rappers who very directly borrowed bits of his style. Um, Most rappers of recent years seem to have developed the wrong habits of Wayne's, unfortunately, for influence. Um, and this is kind of like the main sticking point with Wayne. As great a lyricist as he is, great punchlines, rhyme schemes, um, has a variety of topics, can evoke some real strong emotions in his work, but can be extremely hit or miss in terms of the material that he puts out. And I mean, there's whole periods of his catalogue which are kind of should be avoided except for research purposes. Um, and I say has kind of negatively influenced a lot of recent hip hop. Um, so yeah, I can understand why he's placed at number two on this list. And again, I have no issue with Wayne being having such a high ranking on the list. For me, I don't know if I could have him at number two, though. I think I'd probably take him back a few notches. Again, just because of the largely because of the inconsistency of his catalogue. And number one, Scarface. Again, an extremely influential artist. So for influence alone, I can understand him being at number one. Certainly the first really prominent Southern MC. Early work with the Ghetto Boys really help him put the Southern states on the map for hip hop. And solo work as well has been very influential. Kind of famously your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, as the majority of the prominent figures of the 90s and 2000s had Scarface as their favorite rapper or one of their favorite rappers. Biggie's Ready to Die ends with his suicide because of Scarface doing it on his album before. That's how deep his influence runs. And certainly overall as an artist, the imagery and the emotion they has been able to capture is very strong. In terms of word for word lyricism, can be quite simplistic. And again, not to say that you necessarily have to be, that wordy a rapper. But for me, that's why I wouldn't place him at number one. I'm not. I'm trying to, think about where he would go on my list. And I'm not sure exactly how high I would get him overall. But yeah, I don't really have any issue with him being, and I can completely understand why. So the top two placements on here are definitely very influential placements. In arguably the top five. But yeah, so I mean there are certainly variations I would have on here. And I mean, about half of the list I wouldn't actually have on the list at all. In terms of artists who aren't on here, who I feel could be, I've mentioned Malice earlier. Should definitely be on here with Pusher, or certainly close to Pusher anyway. Pharrell, going to Virginia. Yeah, certainly a very capable lyricist. I mean, I can see that his main influence is perhaps in his production and vocals. It's probably why he's not taken so seriously as a rapper and not therefore not on this list. But go back over his raps, and he does have some really strong bars in his back catalogue. So I would really heavily considering having him on here. And other rappers, J Electronica, someone who probably has been forgotten as well, isn't it? A Southern MC, but it's from New Orleans and is extremely talented lyricist. So I could definitely see him on here. Little Brother as a group and solely MCs. Again, someone I need to hear a bit more from, but things I have heard from them, I can definitely see them being on here. Paul Wall, very capable MC. Chameleonaire. I mean, I can only assume that his reason for not being on here is the fact that he's kind of only done 2 albums and disappeared. But those 2 albums are 2 of the strongest lyrically in all of Southern hip hop. So really, really needs to be in heavy consideration for top 10 all-time Southern lyricists. Who else could we have? The more like undergrounds artists, Jaron Benton. Yellow Wolf, a very strong lyricist. Ritz the Rapper, someone who every time I've heard with Yellow Wolf has pretty much outshined him, and I say Yellow Wolf is no slouch lyrically himself. So Ritz is definitely being in consideration as well for this list. Young Buck, it's always been fairly standard lyrically, not necessarily like the strongest bar for bar, but has always been pretty entertaining and quite an early prominent voice in Southern hip hop. So I could certainly make an argument for him. Little Scrappy has, I mean, I don't know how well his more recent stuff stacks up, but in terms of the early material I heard from him, always seemed a very competent MC, so could certainly make an argument for him. Rhapsody, if we're going North Carolina again, and so again places that would qualify as southern states. I believe DC qualifies, in which case Wale definitely needs to be on here. Again, more recent work may not be as strong as his earlier stuff, but the early stuff was very, very strong. There's some really standout verses early on in his career, and has generally been a very consistent artist in terms of albums and overall material being put out. So I'd certainly have him. Those are certainly some ones that spring to mind. David Banner, who's more proficient as a producer than an MC, but some of his certainly some of his later 2000s, early 2010 material, where kind of tried to put a bit more a different subject matter, explore more content in his music. Actually, quite interesting. And again, some of us probably need to go over a bit more to determine properly, but it was certainly someone who I could make a case for. Stackwo certainly has always had a lot of content to look at. They've and we've been decent lyricists. Bobby Creekwater again, looking at that shady records era. While I may not have gotten out a lot of material, someone I feel like was placed in a more prominent position to showcase themselves more, perhaps. I've certainly had some good verses from him. So I'd certainly be interested to see how well he could have gotten to place him on this list. B.O.B. Very obvious influence from Andre 3000. We have lost his way in recent years, but certainly his early stuff, some very strong stuff lyrically, very introspective MC overall. So that's definitely someone I could get on board with on this list. So there's definitely if you think of the entirety of the genre and all the MCs there are to look for, I can understand why it is difficult to try and fit everyone on to any list. Even top 25, it can be difficult to try and fit as many strong MCs on. But that's just a little oversight to how my list would probably differentiate from this one. But that's why it can be interesting for lists like these. Just think about how you would do it differently. And maybe if there are any more that do come out in terms of overall areas, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, to look at in a similar way, I could certainly be up for that. It'd be interesting to see if this does cause any more similar lists to come out, and if it do, I'm sure I can see you then.